Hello? This video from the Computer Department Incorporated will go over each step involved in setting up and managing simple amortized loan accounts in DLS Financials. You should have already watched the Loans Accounts video that talks about the Accounts tab for loans and what information you can see on the 3 tabs for the loan accounts. This video will go through all the specifics of the functions on the right side of the form and what each of them can do for the simple amortized loans. Account List is the first button below the Account Type buttons. When you click on this button, you will see a list of current loan accounts for this location. The default is to view the currently open accounts with the current principal balance. If you would like to see and work in an account that is currently closed, click on the Closed Accounts tab to change the list. Only the Add button and Close buttons are turned on at this time, as they don't need to know a specific account to do their process. But if you click on an account in the list, it will turn on all the buttons. There are 6 buttons available, but some will only turn on for certain account types. The top one is to run the Recalculate function on the selected account. This will cause the system to run through all the transactions from the opening transaction to the last transaction entered and recalculate the totals to make sure that everything is in balance. If you feel that your balances are incorrect, this should be the first thing that you try to make sure that a recalculation function had not been missed in the program. The next button will open up the contract list for loan. Here you can click on one of the contracts to highlight it, and click on the Print button to print the Word document attached to the contract record with the highlighted accounts information included in the document. You can also double-click on the contract to print it as well. If you decide not to print a contract, click on the Cancel button to return to the account list. A minor feature of DLS is the ability to print a form that will show suggested repayment options for a possible new loan. The loan payment calculator allows you to give acceptable repayment options to the location, so they can then select from before the contract is actually written, and the repayment terms are locked down. To use the function, you can go in from here or through the Maintenance tab on the main menu. The form allows you to enter the description for this possible loan, the amount to be borrowed, the payment period, and the interest rate the loan will have. After completing those fields, you can enter payment amount and have the number of payments calculated, or click on the Number of Payments button to switch, where you will enter the number of payments, and the payment amount will be calculated. You can use both calculation types as they are only used to lock down the other field that you need to enter information into. Once you have up to 6 possible repayment options, you can click on the Print button on the lower left corner of the form, and it will print the form for you to send to the location. They can then select from the list their preferred repayment terms. The next button is to reamortize the schedule on amortized and simple amortized loans. When you click on this button, the system will automatically reamortize the schedule for the highlighted loan. For simple amortized loans, it will remove the current schedule and starting with the current balance and date. A new schedule will be created with the first payment being due at the next future payment date. You can view and print amortization schedules by clicking on one of the next 2 buttons. The View Schedule will bring up the schedule in a form that will show each payment and the principal and interest amounts that should be made. Understand, if the loan is simple amortized, this will not show the payment status because the schedule is a suggested payment schedule and has no connection to the payments made. Print Schedule will print the schedule and show the payment amounts, principal, and interest due or paid on those dates. Again, simple amortized loans will be a suggested schedule and will change over time. The Add button will open a blank account form in Add mode, so that you can create a new account, while the Edit button will open the account form for the highlighted account so that you can change the record. Depending on the mode that you enter the form, some fields and functions will be turned on or off, but for this example we are going to be in Add mode. There are 7 different tabs of information for a simple amortized account. The default tab is Account Description, which holds the information that sets up the account. Loan Description is the top field and may or may not have a drop-down list to select a standard description and lookup number if you have the system set up to require standard descriptions and lookup numbers. Since standard description can be used for different accounts that make them look the same, you can use the subdescription to provide more specific information. If the lookup number is enabled, you can enter any alphanumeric characters into the field to use to look up the account quickly. To the right of this field is the date that the account was opened. No transactions can be entered before this date, so make sure you enter the date that you are going to start accepting transactions. There are 5 different loan types that you can select from. The default one is simple interest, so you will need to change to simple amortized to create this loan type. Select it now, as each type will require different information, and more tabs may appear. If you are in edit mode and click on a different type, you will change the form to the new account type and need to enter the information for the new type. When you do that, the old type will be paid off, and the new type will take over with the balance of the old type when you save the new type. Continuing with simple amortized loans, you can set up a credit limit if the system is configured to use them. There are 2 types of limits, and clicking on the button shown here with credit line, you can switch between the 2. Credit line means that the loan balance can never get above the approved limit in the next field. As they pay it down, they can borrow more without having to apply for a new loan. This is similar to a credit card. The other is a draw limit. When that is selected, then the location can only draw up to the limit. Even if they pay the balance down, they can only draw the approved limit. This is similar to most property loans. In the next field, you can enter an application, RFP, or RFA number. If you use reference numbers on applications and want to link the application to this loan, this is where you would do it. There are 3 options that you can turn on or off to the right. The pending or locked loan is used to lock the loan and prevent transaction from being entered into the loan account. If you have the credit limit filled in, then if you do a report that uses pending loans, it will treat this loan as if the credit limit has already been given. Interest-only and stewardship options are used for reference only and have no effect on the loans within DLS Financials, nor do they print on any reports. The next tab is Interest, which is where you will enter all the configurations for how interest is to be calculated and managed. With new accounts, the default interest rate will already be in the field. This default rate is found in the DLS Financials System configuration of the Maintenance tab on the main menu in the Loan Accounts section of the Accounts tab. If you want this account to be a different rate, simply enter the rate you want. In edit mode, this option is disabled as rates need to be changed through other functions. When interest rates are changed globally, if the default rate is being changed, you will be asked to if you want it changed in the configuration default as well. So the default rate should typically change with all the other accounts when the default rate changes. There is an option to change the rate to be the adjustment to the prime rate that you have entered into DLS Financials. If this is checked, then you should enter the amount that the prime rate should be adjusted. This should be a positive number for amount over prime and negative for amount under prime. To change the interest rate on these accounts, you only need to change the prime rate and all the accounts with this option will change automatically. You can also check the fixed rate option, which means that the rate can never be changed, through the global rate change function. If you need to change the rate on accounts with this option checked, then you will need to do it through the transactions form. But if you need to prevent the rate from going too high, you can check the option to set a max rate and enter the highest rate that the loan is allowed to go. When checked, the person changing the rate will be told that the account cannot be changed if it goes over this amount. There are 3 fiscal year settings that you can select from for how this account will be calculated. The default set in the system configurations will already be set, but you can change it for this account if needed. Actual days means that if it is a leap year, the number of days that interest will be calculated will be 366 days, while all the other years will be 365. If you select 365 days, then on leap year no interest will be calculated for February 29th. Finally, if you select 360, then every month will only calculate for 30 days. The 31st will not calculate any interest, and in February, the last day will actually calculate 1 or 2 days of extra interest, depending on if it is a leap year. Simple amortized loans request that they pay at least a fixed payment amount for each period. At the end of each period, you can print a bill or create and print an invoice for the prior month, depending on your settings. If DLS is set up for creating an invoice, then this next option will be turned off. But if you have the capitalize interest option checked, whatever the balance of the interest is at the end of the period will be transferred to the principal during the month-end close process. Check the period in the set of options below this field to set up which period the interest will be capitalized. The next tab is where you will enter the starting balance of this account. You can create the account without having an initial draw by leaving the field a 0. But if you enter an initial balance, then it will be paid with a check unless you check the option to pay it out as an EFT. If your accounting system is configured for it, or no, check to prevent the accounting system from printing a check. The interest field is not something that you can enter unless you are importing a balance from another software. Clicking on the Status tab will show the options for where the account should be seen and function. The account closed switch can only be checked on when the balance is 0. If the box is checked and there is a balance, then run the recalculation function to have it confirm the 0 balance, and if there is a balance, it will uncheck the close switch. Hide on DLS Online is only available if you are using DLS Online module. When checked, this account will not be seen by any user on the DLS Online website. The flag account option means that when checked, and someone selects to work in this account, it will alert them that they should review the comments about the account before working in it. This is useful when accounts are very special and need to be handled in a different way than most other accounts. The next 3 fields will only appear if there is data in their drop-down list for you to select from, because those fields are restricted to just the values in those lists. Account classification could actually be a required field if the system is configured to require an account classification. Next is the account category, which can be used as a subclassification if you wish. Again, you will only see it if someone has entered items into the drop-down list from the Maintenance tab. Restriction type is used if you want to categorize any restrictions on your accounts. All of these fields can be used in reports to limit the focus of reports to just certain accounts. While simple interest loans don't have a repayment tab, all the other loan types have a repayment tab where you will enter the terms for the loan to get paid back. First, you will select the payment period for each payment. Monthly is the default payment term, but you can change it to any of the options in the drop-down list. By default, the first payment will start 1 month from the beginning date of the loan, but to provide more flexibility, you can select any date when the first payment is to be made in the schedule, and the following payments will be 1 period from the last payment. There are 3 ways to set up the payment schedule. The first option is to enter the payment amount that should be paid each period. When you enter this value, the term will dim out and be filled in with the calculated number of payments to pay off the loan. The payment amount will be applied to the principal and interest, so make it large enough to cover more than the interest calculation for 1 period, or the system will reject it. If you are starting this loan as a 0 balance loan, then you will need to enter the eventual payment amount, but the term will calculate out to be 0 since there is no principal. When you finally do a loan draw, you will need to just re-amortize the loan to have the schedule recreated at that time. Another option is to leave the payment blank and move to the loan term and enter the number of payments that should be paid, and the payment amount will be calculated to have the loan paid off by the end of the term. The field that you want to be calculated needs to be blank to release the other field. Finally, you can check the option to have a balloon payment at the end of the loan terms. In this situation, you can enter the payment amount, and the term and the schedule will make the same required payment each period, and the final payment will be the balance of the loan. The ACH payments option is to tell DLS that you are going to be getting the payments for this loan automatically from the location's bank account via an ACH transaction. Future development will have this switch trigger all payments to be an EFT transaction if your accounting system allows it, or as no check, and DLS will create the ACH files that you will upload to trigger the ACH, while the schedule will automatically be created when you save the form. If you would like to see or print the schedule with these settings, click on the Generate Sample Payment Schedule, and the schedule will be created. If you have a payment start date, you will be asked how you would like to deal with the interest calculated from the start date of the loan to the first payment. Make sure you read that message and answer the question correctly. In edit mode, the Generate button will be replaced with one for two buttons. These are the Refinance and the Reamortize loan buttons. The top one is not used with simple Amortized, but the Amortization button is. When you click on this button, the schedule will be replaced and a new schedule will be created in its place, starting with the current balance and date, with the first payment being one period from the date. Once created the schedule, you can click on the View Schedule to see the schedule and how the principal and interest should be paid. In this form, you will not see if any have been paid because payments do not apply to the actual schedule. Print Schedule will allow you to print this schedule for your records or send to the location. But if you have not saved the record, it is suggested that you save the record and then use the buttons on the account list to view and print the schedule. Remember, since the interest calculation is not done in the schedule with simple amortized loans, the interest amounts may change at the time of payment, so this schedule is noted to be only a suggested schedule. Any payments different than what is in the schedule will calculate a different amount, which will then change the amount of interest charged with other payments after that. Clicking on the Miscellaneous tab will provide any fields that are to hold information that really has no effect on the account. Some dioceses will be working with an FDIC financial institution for borrowing the funds from for the pooled accounts. If you need to, these fields will hold the name of the bank in which those funds are being used. You may even need to notate the account number at the bank that the funds are actually from, in which you can do in the next field on the right. There is also a field named Loan Reason, which you can use in the contract as you would like. Finally, there is the GL Accounts tab, where you will see all the GL numbers that will be affected by this account. In Add mode, these will be the default GL accounts for each GL account type. If this account is a special account that has different GL numbers than the default, please enter the correct GL numbers for each account type. The bottom two are specific to certain accounting systems and will only be available if you are using one of those accounting interfaces. Below the tabbed forms is up to 3 tabs for all the comments about this account. The first tab is for general comments. These comments are only visible to the user on the DLS main program and nowhere else. The same is true for the terms comments, which is where you should put any written description of the terms for interest for this account. But if you have DLS Online, there is a third tab for comments that are visible to the users on DLS Online. Rather than type the same information in both the General tab and the Online tab, you can check the option to match the comments in the General Comments tab in the DLS Online Comment tab. When checked, the DLS Online Comment field will be set to Read Only, and all comments will need to be entered in the General Comments tab. The last option is to include the online comments on the amortization schedule in DLS Online. There are 2 other buttons on the right side of the screen near the top. These are only available when the account has been saved, and you are in edit mode. Normally, accounts are for the location itself, but there may be times that some unit in the location needs an account, and they want to be the primary contact for the account, rather than the location's main contact. In this case, you have the ability to enter alternate contact information for just this account. Clicking on the alternate address will open the fields to enter the alternate mailing name and address that letters, statements, and other information should be sent to. The second button provides the alternate email address field for the persons that should be getting emails about this account. You can select to have the main location emails carbon copied to all the emails for this account as well. The verified switch will tell DLS that it can start using this email address for emails for this account. In both forms, the action buttons do the same thing. The delete button will remove the address or email address from the account. The save button will save the information in that form to the account record and close the form. The close cancel button will exit the form without saving the changes that you made. Once you are done with the account record, you can click the save button on the account record form. This will save the record and exit the form. Should you decide to not save the record and close the form, click on the close/cancel button. The alternate contact information will have already been saved, so the close cancel button will not revert those changes back to the original values. If you have an account that you need to delete, you will need to highlight the account on the list, and if you have permission to delete, the delete button will turn on. Click on the delete button and the account will be deleted, along with all transactions connected to it. Be sure that you want to delete the entire account, because you will not be able to get it back unless you recover the data from a backup file, which will then lose any changes to the data since the backup date. Another button on the account list is named Make Default. Highlight the account that you would like to have as the default account that gets loaded when you select the location and click on this button. This will set the default loan account in the location record for this highlighted account. There are two ways to select the account that you want to work on in the main screen. You can either highlight the account and then click the Select button, or a faster way is to just double-click on the account in the list. Either way, the account list screen will close and you will go back to the main screen. If you don't need to do anything else in this form and want to keep the current account open, then just click on the Close button to return to the main screen. Back on the main form, the next button down is the Edit Account button. Clicking this will bypass the account list to take you directly into the Edit Account form for the currently selected account. When you finish making the edits, you will return back to the main screen and not the account list. Because loan accounts can have scheduled transactions, you may see the View Scheduled Transactions button on the form if you have the Docs module, and if this account has any scheduled transactions assigned to it. If there are currently no scheduled transactions for this account, if you look down to the row of small transaction buttons, you will see the Add Scheduled Transaction button on the left of the plus button. When you click on it, you will go directly to the Add Scheduled Transaction form to enter a new scheduled transaction. Otherwise, if this View Scheduled Transaction button is lit, clicking this button will open the list of currently scheduled transactions for the account, and if you want to add a new scheduled transaction, you can click on the Add button. When you select one of the scheduled transactions in the list, the Edit button will turn on so you can click on it to open the scheduled transaction form in edit mode for that transaction. Double-clicking on the transaction will also take you to the Edit Scheduled Transaction form as well. In this form, you will see the location and account information that you are making the scheduled transaction for. Below those fields will be the fields that you can enter information into in order to have the transaction scheduled when needed. First thing that needs to be selected from the drop-down list is the frequency that the transaction should be scheduled for. There are 8 items in the list that you can select from. If the one that you want is not in the list, contact DLS Financials Support to have it added to the list. After selecting the frequency, you can enter the number of times the transaction should be scheduled for. The default is 0, which means that it will never stop making the transaction until you delete this scheduled transaction from the list. Every time the transaction is created, this number will go down so that in edit mode, you will see how many more times it will create the transaction. Once the last transaction is created, the record will automatically delete to prevent the schedule from continuing to get created. The next row is the date that the next transaction is to be created for. If you enter a date with a day of 29 to 31, the EOM or end-of-month switch will turn on, which will cause the transaction for whatever that last day of the month is for the month and year in the date field. You cannot schedule a transaction for any day that might not exist in every month. Enter a positive number into the amount field. The sign will be set by the button setting to the right of the field. INC means a loan draw or increase. If you have set the permissions for scheduled transactions to allow incoming transactions, then you can change it to Pay, which means to make a loan payment. The only time that this button is available to you is if you have the permission to allow incoming transactions. Then you can click on it to switch to the incoming transaction. You are required to put in a transaction description. An example might be monthly draw. When it is created, it will note that it is a scheduled transaction as well. The last button is to select how the funds are to be paid if a loan increase or draw. Your options are by check or no check if your accounting system doesn't allow EFT imports. Otherwise, you can select to pay it by EFT through your accounting system. Once you have completed your setup of the scheduled transaction, click on the Save button to save the information to the account and exit the form. If you decide you don't want to save the changes, click on the Close Cancel button to exit the form without saving. Back on the scheduled transaction list, if you have permission to delete, you will be able to delete the highlighted scheduled transaction from the list. This will not affect any transactions already made by the scheduled transaction, but prevent any new transactions from being created. After the last transaction in the schedule is created, it will automatically be deleted from the list. When you are done with working on scheduled transactions for this account, click on the Close Cancel button to close the form, which will take you back to the main form. When you open an account on the main form, the plus button will be available for you to insert a new transaction for this account. You do not need to be on the Transaction tab to add a new transaction. But if you are on the Transaction tab, and you have a transaction highlighted, the buttons to the right of the Add button will light up for any transaction you entered. System transactions start with an asterisk and cannot be edited. If the transaction has not been posted, you will see a pencil with the sheet of paper. This indicates that you can edit the transaction. If the pencil is missing, the transaction is locked down and must be unposted to be unlocked. Not all transactions can be unposted, and your diocese may have locked down the ability to unlock transactions entirely. In those situations, the button will not be enabled unless it has the pencil. The red X button or Delete Transaction will also come on if the transaction that is highlighted can be deleted, and you are allowed to delete. If you don't have permission to delete in DLS, you will not see the Delete button at all. If dimmed out, it means that it has been posted and locked down or is a system transaction. When you click on the Delete button, the highlighted transaction and any linked transaction will be deleted after you confirm your command. Linked transactions mean other transactions that were created with the transaction that you are deleting. This could be transactions in other accounts if you are deleting a transfer transaction. If the linked transaction is posted, you will be warned that it was posted and asked if you want to continue with the delete, after being warned that you may need to adjust your accounting system accounts. When you click on the Add or Edit button with the pencil, you will have the transaction form appear in the Add or Edit mode. In Edit mode, certain options are turned off, but for this example, we will be adding a new record so we can go through all the options. No matter which type of transaction you plan on entering, the first field will always be the effective date. This date defaults to the current date, and you can enter any date after the last month-end close date of the account. The effective date is the date that the interest is calculated from the transaction before. Use the Tab key to move to the next field, which will default to the effective date if blank. The date that you enter into this field can be used for any purposes and has no effect on the transaction. Some use it for the postmark of the request, others for the date that it arrived, or the date it was entered. The next option is where you will select which transaction type you want to enter. There are 4 different transaction types that you can enter. The default type is loan payment, so we will go through those fields first. As you change to another type, the fields below will turn on and off for the type that you select. If the loan has no balance, the payment option will be disabled and the loan increase option will be checked. The amount of the payment is the total amount of the payment that is being made, or the amount actual money being paid. In the next two fields, you will break down where to put funds that are being paid. When you tab out of the payment field, the interest will be calculated up to the effective date, and the interest balance up to the payment amount will be put in the interest field, with the remainder going to principal. No matter what it put in the fields for principal and interest, you can change the amount to any values that you would like to put into those areas, just as long as the total of both fields is the same as the payment amount. You cannot save the record if the principal and interest do not add up to the payment amount. All fields should be in positive values, but if you enter them all as negative, it will still work as the system converts to the proper sign when saved. In the next field, you can enter the check number that the funds were sent as. This is an optional field and can remain blank if you don't have a check number. If this is a loan increase transaction, then the form will change to have the following fields, with the first one being the amount of the loan increase or draw. Once you enter the amount, the next field tells you how it will be paid. If you are interfacing with your accounting system, you could have up to 3 choices. Check is the default, but clicking on the button will change it to No Check, and if available, EFT. In the interface, No Check gets sent through the GL to show that it was paid manually, and to not send the funds via a check or EFT. The next field is where you can click on the ellipsis button to show a list of third-party vendors that you can have the funds made out and sent to. If you have not created a list of third-party vendors, this field will not show up since there are none to select from. Because not all dioceses allow you to unpost a transaction, you can use the adjustment entry to fix any data entry errors that were posted, while the other transaction types can be entered as a positive amount. The adjustment transaction amount must be entered as a negative number if it is to be a decrease, or a positive number if you want to increase. You will need to also enter the principal and interest parts that you want to adjust as well. This is also the place where you can move overpayments to interest to principal and vice versa. You do that by entering a negative number in the field that you want to decrease the amount and use a positive number for the other. The total amount in this situation would be 0, because cash is not being affected. A special note that you need to remember is that adjusting entries do not get sent through the accounting interface, so if you need to show this change in the principal in the accounting system, you will need to make the matching adjustment in the accounting system. If the account is set up to make invoices, there will be an option to also adjust an invoice record by the same amount. Also, since the adjustment is not a standard transaction, you will need to enter a description as to why you are making this transaction. While most interest rate changes are done globally, there may be a time when you need to change just one account's interest rate. This is why there is a transaction type called Change Interest Rate. The only field available to you is the new rate that will take effect at midnight on the effective date. All transactions already in the system after this rate change will have their rate be changed as well. All the transaction types show the interest rate that will be used to calculate the interest for the account from the last transaction before it to this transaction. While the rate change transaction will change the rate that is used after this transaction, this rate will remain different from the one in the field above. Other than the adjustment transaction type, transaction descriptions are optional but useful. If left blank, the auto description of payment, draw, or rate change will be put into the description when you save. Next to the field, there may be up to 2 buttons available. The top one will bring up the list of standard pre-written description entered into the system. If there are none in the system, then this button will be hidden. You can double-click on the one that you want to put into the description field, or click on the comment to highlight it and click Select to put into the field. Use the Close or Cancel button to exit the form. The other button is to put the description that will automatically be put into the description into the field, so that you can then add more information after it. Again, if left blank, the auto description will automatically be put into the field when you click on Save. Clicking on the Save button will process the transaction that you are creating. You can edit the transaction until you do the daily post, but you can't change the transaction type once it is saved. If you decide that you don't want to save the data you entered, click on the Close/Cancel button to exit the form without saving. Not all loan transactions can be edited because of their complex nature. If that is the case with a transaction that you try to edit, you will be told that it can't be edited and that you will need to delete the transaction and re-enter the transaction correctly. Once a transaction has been posted, the middle Edit button will no longer have the pencil with the paper. But if it is still enabled, it means that you can click on the paper button to enter the Unpost function for the highlighted transaction. This form is red because it is not something we would like you to do. But since DLS is not an FDIC-certified program, and internal sub-accounts are not regulated by the government, we allow it to happen if your system is set up to allow you to do it. Please read and follow the instructions found on this form. There is important information on the form concerning the accounting interface if you use IF, as well as step-by-step instructions on how to get the unlock code from our main phone number. When you call the computer department, Inc. main number of 217-788-8234, you will get the automated staff transfer message. Click only on the 0 button when the message starts. Do not click on any other number. It will ring all the staff members that can provide the unlock code. It doesn't need to be a DLS Financials support staff member. Do not hang up the phone until someone answers, or you get the DLS support automated message. This is because after about 15 seconds, your call will be transferred to the DLS support staff, and if someone is available, they will answer the phone. If no one is available, please leave a message, and we will get back to you very soon. Hanging up before someone answers and not leaving your direct number with your extension will just slow down the process of getting the code. While the form is on the screen, read the lock serial number to the person that answers the phone, and they will give you a shorter code number back. If you have more than one transaction, tell the person how many you have, because more than 6 would be faster if the support staff got on your computer and helped you with the situation. If you get the voicemail message, it is because we are all busy with other clients. The serial number is not connected to the transaction itself, but a random number generated with the opening of the form. This means that every time you open the form, you will get a different number. If you have the time, you can email the serial number to support and leave the form open until you get the code back. If we are unable to answer the phone, then sending the email may speed up the process because it is possible to email back the unlock code. If the code is correct, the Unpost button will bring up a message telling you that it worked or failed. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes numbers get misread or miskeyed into our decipher program. If that happens, just open the form again and try again with a new number. If you decide not to unpost this transaction, click on the Cancel button to exit the form. Just like with deposits, there is a special way that you should pay off a loan with a final payment. This is called the Pay All transaction, which is the next button below all the transaction buttons. This special transaction form will start with the effective date. The date defaults to the current date, and you can enter any date after the last month-end close date of the account, but not past the next month-end close date. The effective date is the date that the interest is calculated from the transaction before. Use the Tab key to move to the next field called Date of the Payment. The date in the effective date will automatically be filled in if it was blank. The date that you enter can be used for any purposes and has no effective on the transaction. Some use it for the postmark of the request, others for the date that it arrived or the date it was entered. When you tab out of the effective date, the total payoff balance will appear in the bottom of the form to show you how much will need to be paid and includes all the interest up to the effective date. You cannot change the amount to be paid after filling in the dates, so if you are paying an amount different than this amount, you will need to contact the location and request the proper amount. In the check number field, enter the number of the check that they sent for their payment. The transaction description is optional, and if left blank, it will automatically fill in that this is a pay-all transaction. Use the Save button to create the transactions needed to pay the account to zero balance, including all invoices and interest. The form will close when done. If you decide to not pay off this loan, then click the Close/Cancel button to exit the form without saving. If a location has several loans with balances, you can consolidate them into a new loan so that they only need to make one payment. When you click on the special transaction called Consolidate, you will get a form that shows all the current loans with balances. Highlight at least 2 or more of these loans and click on the Add Consolidated Loan button. If you decide to not consolidate at this time, click on the Close/Cancel button to close the form. But if you do consolidate the loans, the new loan form will come up for you to fill out. The amount of the loan will automatically be filled in with the total amount of all the loans that you selected, including interest. Fill out the new loan settings and click on the Save button. If you change your mind about creating a new consolidated loan, then click on the Close/Cancel button. When you click on Save, the system will ask if you want to include past due interest payments. This includes interest from the date of the last transaction of each loan to the starting date of this new loan. If you say yes, the amount will change, and those interest amounts will be added. Once done, the selected loans will be paid off, and this new loan will start at the date you selected. There may be a time when the diocese decides to write off a location's loan balance. In that case, you have a special transaction button called Write Off. Only users with permission to use management functions will see this button. This is only used for complete write-off balances. If you only need to write off a portion, then use the transaction adjustment type. You will get a warning message when you click on the button to remind you that you are writing off the entire balance. To cancel, click on No, but clicking Yes will take you to this form. Here, you will enter the date that the right transaction will be effective. The default date is the date of the last transaction entered into the system. There is no other date to enter like other transactions. There is a field for you to enter the GL account number that you want the unpaid funds to go to within your accounting system, if you have the accounting interface. The interface will move all interest and principal receivable amount for the loan into this general ledger account. Clicking on the red write-off button will process the transactions needed to zero the balances. Even if the month that is in the effective date has been closed, it will write off the balance back at that date. If you decide not to process the write-off, then click on the Close/Cancel button to exit the form. Thank you for watching. If you need to get more detailed training, feel that this video needs to be more detailed, or is missing information in any area, or you still have questions about managing your simple amortized loan accounts in DLS Financials, please contact DLS support at 217-697-0105, extension 5, or email support@dlsfinancials.com.